Today marks 2 years since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, which protected the right to have an abortion. It's a divisive issue that many voters say will likely be taken into account when deciding who to vote for in the upcoming elections. Today, Democratic leaders held a virtual roundtable to discuss what they believe are the devastating effects of overturning Roe v. Wade. They remarked that the abortion ban in Wisconsin could impact future generations, as abortion training is no longer offered to medical students. If they do need to perform the procedure, they can result in political retaliation in Wisconsin. Democrats say the number one reason for choosing to have an abortion is the lack of affordability to raise a family.
We don't have paid family leave. We don't have affordable child care. And it's the Republican extremists in Madison that won't even allow Medicaid to fund postpartum care. So these issues are real and they're crippling Wisconsin.
Pro-Life Wisconsin also released a statement for the decision anniversary, saying in part, quote, "On the second anniversary of the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe versus Wade, we celebrate all human life from conception to natural death and recommit ourselves to working for the day when all of God's children are safe from the horror of abortion," end quote.